What's happening? A good Thursday to all of you. Thanks for joining me. It is very much appreciated. If you're looking for an alternative, and I know many people are looking for an alternative for Boston Sports Talk, hopefully we are providing that to all of you. Tell your friends, tell your family. Also, don't forget to rate and review Apple Pods and Spotify. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Still trying to hit those 1,000 subscriptions. We're under 50 to go with that. And every single thumbs up means an awful lot. Speaking of an awful lot, we got an awful lot to get to today. We'll get to Craig Breslow's press conference with the Red Sox. We'll also get to the Celtics just looking amazing early on in this season. But we begin with Bill Belichick because, of course, we do. Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, and this is a transcript of a recent appearance from Mike. Here's what he said about Bill Belichick and Belichick possibly going to the Washington Commanders once this season is over. I heard something over the weekend. It's not a report. Let's just stop right there for a second. It's not a report. So this is a theory, scuttlebutt, rumor, innuendo, whatever you want to say. This is not a report. What I heard over the weekend from someone I know and someone I trust that made me say, whoa, that's interesting, is the possibility that the end result for the Commanders is a trade with the Patriots for Bill Belichick. It makes sense, and it puts in a new context that leak, that strange Sunday morning splash report about Belichick in the offseason signing a lucrative multi-year contract. My first thought, again, this is Florio, my first thought was that's Belichick camp getting out the idea that this guy ain't going to be fired during the season. The other explanation for it is it's the Patriots getting out the idea as owners throughout the league begin the process of figuring out who they want to hire next year. It's a reminder you're not just going to be able to hire Bill Belichick. If you want him, you got to deal with us. Florio continues, says, when you throw in yesterday's developments, of course, he's talking about Tuesday's trade deadline. Number one, the Commanders were clearly in, quote, we're preparing for the future without our current key employees, unquote, mode. And number two, Josh McDaniels is available again. All the more reason to go get Bill because you can bring Josh McDaniels in as the offensive coordinator. Says again, it's not a report, i.e. just throwing stuff up against the wall that I might have heard. It's not a report, but it's definitely something that is making its way around the grapevine. Okay, does it make sense? I'll give you a few things that make sense and a few things that definitely do not make sense. Here's the stuff that makes sense. You got a new owner in Washington, Josh Harris. New owners want to make big-time splashes. And this is really not just in sports. I worked in radio for a number of years, as many of you know. And a lot of times when a new program director, I had that position in Sacramento before I decided to stay hosting and then move back home due to family reasons. So I can tell you from personal experience, a lot of times when program directors in radio take over, they want to make their move. Right? They want to put a stamp on their new regime. And a lot of times when new radio program directors jump in, you will see a change in the station's lineup, for example. Something will be mixed up there. Whether it's bringing in a new talent or shifting a show to a different location, all of those different things. And it's very similar in sports. New owner walks in, they want to make their move. They want to make their moves, multiple, right? They want to make that splash. So new owner, Josh Harris, money to spend. A splashy name would be Bill Belichick. Washington fans would be excited about that because of Bill's resume. The McDaniels-Belichick thing makes a lot of sense. We talked about this yesterday for a few minutes. Belichick loves to keep it in the family, loves having people that he trusts surrounding him within the football operation. And it would make a lot of sense that if Bill Belichick went down to Washington, McDaniels is now a free agent. He's not going to be a head coach anytime soon, maybe never again. He's looking at another OC job. That makes sense. And for the Patriots, trading Belichick would make a ton of sense. If you're moving on from Bill, there's really no better way to move on from him than to trade him and bring back some draft capital, bring back some assets for the head coach, right? You want to bring in as many picks as you can. You want to try to rebuild this thing and get this thing going and have a roster that's more talented. So you would want the picks. You also would get out of Belichick's contract for however much that is for and for however long it's for. You'd get out of the contract. And I also think from an optics standpoint, and owners are always worried about the optics. From an optics standpoint, yeah, you're letting Bill Belichick walk away which in a certain way you could say is firing Belichick, but we know what would happen here. Belichick would, I think, make it look like it was something he was interested in. Kraft could paint it as we're doing a solid for the guy who won us 6 Super Bowls. This would kind of dodge the, oh, he got fired, he was a miserable fail at the end of his career in New England and all that stuff. It would help shield some of that. Not all of it, but at least some of it. So the optics, I think, would look better if this is Belichick and Kraft working hand in hand to continue Bill's legacy elsewhere, to chase the Don Shula record. It would make, I think, everybody feel better within that franchise, would make them feel better about how things ended. Instead of fired, go try to find a job in a couple of years, Bill. So that stuff makes sense. Now, here are some of the things that don't make sense or that I think are significant obstacles or questions about this idea of Belichick going to Washington, which ultimately I don't think will happen. Number one, you have a team in Washington that just traded Sweat and Young. Sounds like a bad law firm. They just traded those defensive edges this week. I mean, you would think that they traded those guys saying to themselves, we're not going to win anything this year. We've got to look forward, which goes hand in hand with this idea of trading for a Bill Belichick. Organization that's looking forward. That's going to be a theme, looking forward. So Josh Harris, Washington ownership, front office, they decide to move on from Montez Sweat and Chase Young. Inevitably, if you're trading for Belichick, the Patriots are going to want to rake you over the coals. The Patriots have all the leverage. They've got Belichick's contract. They have him still within the operation. They have all of the leverage. And if you're the Patriots, you're going to try to soak every single asset you can from Washington in this hypothetical deal. Do you think Washington is going to trade their first-round pick for Bill Belichick? I can guarantee you that's what Kraft would be asking for. I don't know if that's what they would have to give up. But if this is going to be a team that's tanking, they're not very good to begin with, just traded 2 of their best defensive players. Their defense has been pretty much trashed this season. If this is going to be a team that is, quote unquote, tanking, and they have a top 5 pick, 6 pick, 7 pick, even in the second round, that is a very valuable pick. In the first round, forget about it. You're not trading a top 10 pick for a coach. It's not going to happen. So how does that work? Because you know Kraft is going to go back to his trade with the Jets for Belichick and say, hey, look, we traded a first-round pick. We traded a first, a fourth, and a seventh. And we got Bill a 5th and a 7th back. And Kraft, I would have to imagine, would be looking for a first-round pick. So how would that work? There's no way Washington would pull the trigger on that deal. They're not trading a top 10 pick. It's not happening. If it happens, great news for the Patriots. But I don't anticipate that being a thing. Secondly, does Bill Belichick really want to start from scratch? I know Bill Belichick wants to absolutely take out Don Shula and be that guy at the top of the mountain. He's motivated by it. I still believe he loves football with every fiber of his being. But at 72 years old, is Belichick really wanting to move his life, to move his career, to start all over? What he has built in New England is really his franchise. It's his vision with the kind of programs that he wants his guys to run. You know, Belichick has everything underneath him in New England working like a fine oiled machine in just the way that he wants it. Is he willing to go to another organization and start all over again? I don't know. At 72 years old, that is a monumental challenge. He might want to do that, but that's a big time challenge. Do you think Belichick would be willing to trust an owner who's been on the job for like less than a year? That would be a gigantic leap of faith from Belichick. Do you see him having that within his framework as a human? Do you think Belichick would look over and say, I'm going to go join a brand new owner in this league, a guy that's completely and utterly new to the whole system of how the NFL works. Yes, he owns a hockey team, and yes, he owns an NBA team, but this is somebody who is completely unproven within the NFL world. I'm going to end up going to that new owner, and I'm going to put the final years of my NFL career as a coach in the hands of a new owner. That is, again, a gigantic leap of faith. I find it hard to believe Belichick would do that. Not impossible, but hard to believe. Let's look at Josh Harris, that owner. He stepped in at the trading deadline. He stepped in. He made the decision and said, we need to move on from Sweat and Young. And you got to imagine maybe it's because they knew they weren't going to pay those guys. We've got to move on from the two pass rushers. We have to make this move. Now, Kraft, again, seemingly did not step into the office of Belichick before the trading deadline and offer a mandate of, hey, look, this is what's got to happen. So Belichick, again, used to an owner who's been at it for a long time and somebody who does not meddle an awful lot in business. Kraft got involved with the Brady decision, as we all know, but he's not a guy that is going to go into Bill's office and demand things, at least not consistently, maybe once every 15 years when you're talking about the greatest player of all time. But would Belichick want to work for an owner that is a meddling owner, that is a guy who wants to be involved and invested at that high of a level? I don't know, especially when that guy is new to the NFL. Or do you think Belichick would look at Josh Harris and say, okay, Buttercup, I've been in football for like 50 years. Okay, you're not going to walk into this office and tell me how to run this program. Something tells me that you would get that Belichick. I don't think you'd get the Belichick of, come on in, Josh, have a seat. Let's talk football philosophy. You've been on the job for less than a year. Let's have this conversation. Come on in. I don't think you'd see that. I don't. And do you think that owner who wants to get involved and be that invested in the program, do you think that owner is willing to give Belichick 100% of the power, which is what Belichick is going to ask for? I don't. This is also an owner that leans heavily into analytics. Hire Daryl Morey in Philadelphia, right? Morey in the NBA world is like Captain Analytics. He was the guy that brought Harden into Houston and told everybody that Harden is pretty much the best offensive player to ever live because of the metrics and the analytics. Do you think Josh Harris and his analytical mind is going to work well with Bill Belichick's old school blow snot football mind? Hey, Bill, I think the DVOA. What's DVOA? You think that's going to work? You think Belichick would be excited to rip open the analytic book at 72 years old and say, all right, I'm gonna go work for a brandy new owner who loves to be involved in things, who is going to want to try to teach me analytics? I can't wait for that kind of a gig. Possible, incredibly unlikely. And if you're Belichick, do you want to take over the roster? Do you want to have to figure out the quarterback position? Sam Howell has some strengths. He definitely has his weaknesses. Is Belichick going to want to go to a team that has to make a huge decision about the future of QB1 when he just had to go through the same thing with Mac Jones and it hasn't gone well? And do you think the Commanders would want to give Belichick that responsibility to go shopping for that grocery after what he has done with Mac Jones? Do you think Washington will look at that and say, that's the guy we need? There he is. Anything is possible, but I find it very hard to believe that Bill Belichick would end up as the Washington Commanders head coach, not even to mention that he's good friends with Ron Rivera. All right, Craig Breslow's press conference, Celtics crushing it last night, yet again against Indiana, all of that coming up. But before we get to that, looking for an alternative, rate and review. Don't forget, rate and review, Spotify, Apple Pods, like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube channel. All those likes mean an awful lot. Your comments mean a lot, and your subscriptions mean a lot. 1,000 subscriptions is the goal. Trying to get there, hopefully, by the end of tomorrow. Missed the goal by Halloween night. Let's get there. Love your help and your support. Again, if you're looking for an alternative, that's what we are trying to accomplish here with the Nick Cattle Show. All right, Craig Breslow met with the media earlier today in his introductory press conference as the chief baseball officer. And the first thing was ownership. Nobody from ownership at the podium. And we've grown accustomed to this. It's still inexcusable. It's still irresponsible. It's still absolutely and utterly freaking ridiculous that when you have a moment like this, that you don't have one single person in ownership up there at the podium to answer questions. And I know they did media scrums on the side and all of that. I know Tom Werner spoke to the media on the side. I understand it. But we're talking about being at the dais. Think about Wick Grossbeck when a big decision is made. Wick's there. I can guarantee you if Robert Kraft fires Bill Belichick or trades Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft is going to be sitting up there at the podium telling fans why that decision was made. And this has been a problem. John Henry doesn't seemingly care as much about the Red Sox as he did going back a few years ago. And if that's not the case, then John, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Get your tuchus up at the podium and talk about Craig Breslow. And Sam Kennedy does a fine job, a little over the top at times, does a fine job. You're the owner of the franchise. Get up there and open your mouth. Flap them gums. Let us know why Breslow's the guy. You didn't take questions when you fired Heimblum, and you didn't go up there to the podium today to discuss Breslow. Non-existent owner. Zero presence for this baseball team. At least he showed up. He showed up 20 minutes late, but he showed up. I guess you can't be there on time when you're making a decision like, hiring a chief baseball officer. You can spare the 20 minutes. The last formal press conference that John Henry sat at the podium for was when they traded Mookie Betts. That was in February of 2020. We're going on 4 years since we've seen John Henry sit at a podium at a formal press conference and take questions. 4 years. There's just this blatant disconnect between this ownership group and the fan base. I mean, maybe they're just afraid that John Henry is going to say something stupid. Maybe they're afraid that he's going to say something that he's going to regret or somebody else is going to regret or the entire franchise is going to regret. But it's absurd that your owner is not up there front and center taking questions about this massive of a decision, especially when there's been such turnover at the head of baseball ops. All right, but let's get into Breslow. That takes care of ownership. Number one thing that I took away from this press conference, Craig Breslow wanted me, wanted you, wanted everybody to know within the distance of his voice that he is not Heimblum. He pounded this point today. He wants you to know he's not the last guy. Part of Breslow's opening statement, he said, I understand that some of you will see me as another nerd with a baseball front office job. It's true. I'm that. But I'm also a 13-year big leaguer and 2013 Boston Red Sox world champion. So, yeah, I might be one of those Ivy League nerds, okay? I know you just had one in the front office, and it's cute, right? We wear khakis. We got our hair coiffed perfectly. We've got our button-up shirts. And you might want to cast me as that character, but let me remind you that I played in the big leagues for 13 years and that I won a ring right here in Boston. So if you want to compare me to that last guy, that's a mistake on your part. I'm not that last guy. I am somebody that is different from him. I used to work in sales a long time ago when I was in college. And one of the things that you do in sales is that you handle objections. And what you try to do is you try to get ahead of those objections. That's what Breslow did today. With that statement, he's getting ahead of your objection. Oh, he's just another baseball nerd. Well, I'm going to kindly handle that right at the top of this press conference. He is handling your objection. He's also showing confidence. Aside from saying, I'm not that guy, he's telling you, I've been in the big leagues for 13 years. I'm a guy who won a ring. I get it, quote unquote, at a higher level than that guy did. So that's the message. And this continued. This was a theme throughout the press conference. Breslow reminding us that he is not Chaim Bloom. A few minutes into the questions, Breslow said, quote, part of winning is making bold, difficult decisions. Some of those, and this is really the jab at Chaim Bloom, and I don't think Breslow has any kind of personal issue with Bloom. Again, he's doing this for a reason. He's trying to separate himself from the last guy. He is trying to tell you, the fans and the media, how he's going to be different than the last guy that did not work here in Boston or work out here in Boston. So when he says part of winning is making bold, difficult decisions, we all know that one of the main criticisms of Chaim Bloom was that he did not want to pull the trigger at the trading deadline, that he was hesitant to make big moves. There was that report that he did not want to trade Chris Sale last offseason, which still blows my mind. He was either unwilling or uncomfortable or just took way too much time making bold decisions for this franchise. And so here is Breslow saying, I understand that part of winning is making these bold, difficult decisions. Ipso facto, I know the last guy, he didn't quite understand that. And then the cherry on top, the chef's kiss, mwah, to this comment by Breslow was when he said some of those include, so some of these bold, difficult decisions, some of those include leveraging prospect capital to enhance your major league team. That is a direct shot at how Chaim Bloom operated. You didn't have it in you to make those bold, difficult decisions, and you were unwilling to trade some of your prospect capital to make the big league club better. I'm not that guy. Later on, Breslow said, I have the willingness and the conviction to make the tough decisions necessary to succeed in this role. The willingness and conviction. Bloom was not willing. Therefore, really, Bloom showed zero conviction to make those kinds of moves that would be necessary to succeed in his role and to make the ball club successful. So the first thing that jumped out at me was, I'm not Chaim Bloom. Do not put me in that company. I'm not that guy. Second thing that stood out to me was the spending. Because look, Craig Breslow could be great at his job, but if the ownership does not give him the money to spend, it doesn't really matter, right? Doesn't matter as much. Well, Breslow unequivocally told everybody today that he has money to spend, that he has the resources. He said, quote, we have some needs to fill, multiple ways to get there. He's going to look at all paths. He was asked specifically about a budget. He said, quote, unwavering commitment. There's an unwavering commitment to winning from ownership, a willingness to overturn every stone. Later than that, he said, resources are not a problem here. Later than that, in this press conference, Breslow said, I don't see financial resources as a limiting factor. He was asked several times about spending, the ability to spend, the resources, and he consistently said today, that is not an issue. I have the money to spend. We have the resources. We have every possible path that we can take to make this ball club better. He was asked about pitching. And he said pitching, specifically starting pitching, is an area of need and is really the area of need, and that they are going to shift their focus towards starting pitching. You don't get starting pitching unless you're going to spend some money. And I thought Alex Spear, who spoke with Tom Werner in one of those media scrums, they showed this on NESN, thankfully. And I actually posted this on X. If you want to follow me, it's at Nick C Radio. Alex Spear framed the question perfectly when speaking with Tom Werner. Spear brought up starting pitching, and he actually brought up Dave Dombrowski and Chris Sale and said, when you guys hired Dave, you came out and you said you needed a number one. You needed an ace. You went out there and you spent. You went out there and you spent the money, on David Price. You went out there and you made moves, right? You made these moves for Chris Sale. And Werner said, we don't have any built-in restrictions. When Spear brought up spending $217 million on David Price, it was, look, we don't have any built-in restrictions. We just don't have them. So that is Tom Werner telling us that we don't have any restrictions financially. We have zero restrictions. You spent the whole $217 million on David Price going back years ago. Well, we're going to do it. 2015, we spent that money on David Price. We're willing to spend money. Dave Dombrowski came in. He acquired Chris Sale because we needed a true number one, a true number one, a true ace on this ball club. We got it done. No restrictions. No built-in restrictions. So Craig Breslow is not Chaim Bloom. That was the first message. The second message was we're going to be willing to spend money on pitching. We're going to be willing to spend money on whatever we got to spend money on. We're going to open up the wallets. How about experience? Well, Breslow addressed that. He said he's ready to take on the challenge. He points to two things: number of talented people in the front office, and also opportunities to learn from some of the most successful mentors in this game. Didn't love the answer. It's okay. But I thought Breslow answering the question about his experience or lack thereof as the number one guy, it came across to me as an answer that you would hear in an interview room. And even how he delivered it. It was like, this is exactly what he said to John Henry if John Henry asked him about his lack of experience as a number one. Just kind of came across to me as like paint by numbers interview stuff. Autonomy. Sam Kennedy said that Breslow will make all the baseball decisions. Good. Let him do his job. As far as hiring a GM, Breslow really didn't attack that head on. He said he's going to, try to get up to speed, as if he doesn't know who's in the front office already. He said the most prudent thing is to evaluate the landscape and not rush into it. I get it. You don't have to rush into it. He also loves the word prudent. The Cora dynamic, the relationship, Breslow said unequivocally, Alex will be the manager in 2024. He's excited to build that relationship. It should be a partnership in which we're influencing each other. Interestingly enough, no thoughts on Cora as far as long-term. Just talking about this season. So those were the five major points about the Breslow press conference that stood out to me. I'm not Chaim Bloom. We're willing to spend the number one experience kind of stuff. He's going to have full autonomy, and he's hopeful that he and Cora can work together really well. All right. Looking for an alternative. Again, don't forget to rate and review Spotify, Apple Pods. If you love what we do here, give us that thumbs up on YouTube, comment, and subscribe. Let's wrap up with some quick Celtics notes. And my freaking goodness, that game was ridiculous last night against the Pacers. 155-104. 155-104. I don't care who you're playing. I don't care how talented you are. To score 155 points in a regulation pro basketball game, didn't go in overtime, nothing crazy, not double overtime, not triple overtime, to score 155, $155 against another NBA team is ridiculous. Absolutely crazy. This team's professional. I talked about it on the Cattle's on Causeway podcast. Check that out. We got to drive some traffic there. Cattle's on Causeway. If you love the Celtics, that's my exclusive Celtics pod, Cattle's on Causeway. It is on this YouTube channel. You can check that out. I've talked about this team's professionalism and their intent. You saw that again last night. They're up by 20 points at home against a team that doesn't have their best player, Tyrese Halliburton, on the floor, and they're playing really good transition defense. Up by 20. They're getting back. They're hustling. They're playing hard. After blowing out Washington on Monday night. You blow out Washington on Monday. You come back at home. You're blowing out Indiana, and you're still playing hard. We have not been able to say that about this team in quite a long time. You have a 19-point lead at halftime. You come out in the third quarter, 21-11 start to that quarter. Game over. Game, set, match. See you later. But again, coming out of halftime, being ready, playing hard, playing right, and building on that 19-point lead. They didn't come out to start that third quarter and say, no Halliburton, we're blowing them out. Let's just roll the basketballs out there and see what happens. professional, playing with intent. Tatum's offense is beautiful. This is arguably, I would say, it's his best stretch of offensive basketball in totality that I have seen from him. And the reason why I say that is because of the versatility, the variety of the offense. He's doing everything. He's taking and making threes, different types of threes. He's showing you some mid-range, fade away from the mid-range. He's showing you post-game, back to the basket type stuff. He's giving you straight line drives. I posted last night on X. This really is, from Jason Tatum, 4 games into this season, it is a symphony of offensive brilliance. The guy has been tremendous. He is playing at an all-time level. It's 4 games. I know. I'm just telling you, the way he's played through those 4 games. Bananas. 30 points on 15 shots last night. He played 27 minutes, had 30 points. The stat I love is that he had 2 times as many free throws as he had threes. Fantastic. That tells you he's being aggressive. He's attacking. He's in the post. He's driving. He's finishing through contact. He's forcing teams to foul him. He had 12 rebounds, again, showing the willingness of physicality. He's been great. Derek White, Drew Holiday continue to play really good basketball. They just play so much bigger than they are. I mean, Holiday is a pretty big dude for a guard. Don't get me wrong, but you have no issue with either of your guards dropping down into the paint to defend forwards. I mean, they just play so big on both ends of the floor. And speaking of Derek White, if he continues to shoot like this, I don't think you can expect him to shoot like that. But if he shoots like this the entire year, my God. If you thought this team's top 6 was really good and tough to slow down offensively, if White is shooting like this, they're even better and tougher. He's knocking down shots behind the arc like it's no big deal. Threes in transition, step back threes, deep threes, corner threes. And the bench showed up last night, which was nice to see. Hauser had a big night shooting, which he desperately needed. I thought Peyton Pritchard played with much more aggression, which is what you need. And I've said this before, O'Shea Brissett's energy, love it. He's the loose ball guy. He's the scrapper. He defends. Brissett with a couple of starters out there, I love his energy. I love the different aspect of the game that he can bring. So the bench had a really good night last night, and that was needed. But 155 to 104, my goodness, what a game. All right, that'll wrap it up on this Thursday. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. We're back tomorrow with, I'm sure, Patriots stuff to talk about. The Bees play tonight. They're all damaged, right, on the D. You've got Grizzlick out. You've got McAvoy with the suspension. So we'll see what that looks like tonight. But until tomorrow, it's the Nick Cattle Show.